Welcome to a world that's both fancier and filthier than your aunt's Victorian doily collection. We're stepping into the realm of being filthy rich in Victorian London. This is what happens when you combine unlimited wealth, industrial smog, 14 layers of undergarments, and a nationwide fear of fainting in public. Imagine a life where your bathtub costs more than your neighbor's house. Your teeth glow like pearls if you have them, and you pay actual humans to stand around looking bored just so your hallway feels extra long. Before we begin this journey together, take a moment to settle in, get as comfortable as possible, because we're about to explore questions that have plagued historians for decades. Did rich Victorians ever touch their own door handles? Did anyone actually enjoy eating jellied eels? Or was that just an elaborate prank on the lower classes? Could you survive a day in a mansion where going outside meant sending your butler to check if the air was still hazardous? Would you rather risk tuberculosis or run out of imported French soap? Did people really faint that often, or was it just a national hobby? And what exactly did one do with 12 forks at a single meal? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1865 in the heart of London, and you're filthy, stinking rich. There's a servant ironing your newspaper, a chef crafting a 6-course breakfast, and a strange, inexplicable sense that your ancestors expect you to marry your cousin. Let's see if you can survive being at the top without dying of boredom, embarrassment, or spontaneous corset malfunction. You awake in a bed so large it has its own weather patterns. Sunlight trickles through layers of imported French lace curtains, filtered by a gentle haze of coal smoke that gives everything a romantic, albeit slightly toxic, glow. Your first conscious act involves summoning a servant to gently cough near the window, testing the air quality. This is not paranoia, this is prudence. In Victorian London, the air outside could range from merely unpleasant to actively murderous. And you didn't accumulate this fortune by taking unnecessary risks with your respiratory system. Will you get up immediately, or simply send for tea and wait for the housekeeper to alert you that London has finished combusting for the day? You lie there, considering your options while wrapped in a duvet stuffed with the feathers of birds, so rare you're not entirely convinced they exist. The coverlet is heavy enough to keep even the most persistent worries at bay, and somewhere beneath all these covers, your legs have fallen asleep. But it's hardly worth the effort to find out where they've gone. Besides, it's far too early for lower limb engagement. In Victorian London, the true sign of wealth isn't diamonds or deeds. It's never having to move faster than a slow, elegant roll from one position to another. The air in your bedroom is a complex cocktail, equal parts rosewater, chimney soot, and whatever your neighbor's factory is producing this week. Your lungs ache gently with privilege, a sensation you've learned to interpret as the sweet pain of success. Outside your sanctuary, the city growls to life. Horses clop along cobblestone streets. Milkmen shout their wares in voices already hoarse from the morning fog. And somewhere, a newsboy is losing his voice to announce headlines that will be forgotten by time. But inside your world, everything is soft, serene, and deeply unnecessary. This is exactly how you prefer it. A delicate bell sits at your bedside, polished so often by devoted staff that it has developed what you suspect is a philosophical dislike of fingerprints. You ring it, with the practiced indifference of someone who's never once had to fetch their own breakfast, let alone their own socks. The sound is melodious and commanding, a tiny silver dictator that summons help from the mysterious depths of your household. Moments later, your valet glides in wearing silk shoes, maintaining a neutral expression, and sporting hair parted with architectural precision. He knows the drill by heart. Check your pulse without being obvious about it. Fluff your pillows to mathematical perfection, and pretend not to notice that your hair is currently auditioning for the role of Victorian haystack. He's been with the family for decades, and his discretion is legendary. Rumor has it, he once watched your uncle accidentally set fire to his own mustache and never mentioned it to a living soul. Your valet draws back the curtains with a flourish, so dramatic it nearly wakes your ancestral portraits hanging on the opposite wall. The room floods with what passes for sunlight in London, which is to say, a kind of pale gray suggestion of morning, accompanied by the gentle whoosh of soot particles finding their forever home in your expensive Persian rugs. The air is described by your staff as brisk, which, in Victorian code, means only lightly poisonous today. Would sir care to rise? Your valet inquires, already arranging your slippers by the bedside, with the reverence typically reserved for religious artifacts. Each slipper is positioned at the precise angle calculated to make standing as effortless as possible, because even the act of putting on footwear should never require actual effort. When you're this wealthy, you contemplate this seemingly simple question as if it were a matter of international diplomacy. On one hand, rising means facing the terrifying prospect of your own reflection in the floor-length mirror. And nothing says privilege quite like bed hair sculpted by 12 hours of tossing atop a 1,000 thread count pillow. On the other hand, if you stay in bed any longer, there's a genuine chance you'll be mistaken for one of the marble statues positioned throughout the hallway, and that would create an awkward situation for everyone involved. You opt for compromise, a decision-making strategy that has served your family well for generations. Tea first. You decide, because the best defense against meaningful decision-making is a cup of something that costs more than most people's annual wages. Your valet nods approvingly and glides away to relay this crucial information to the appropriate department of your households. Complex hierarchy. The footman returns, moments later, bearing a silver tray with tea so fragrant it nearly overpowers the background aroma of industrial revolution wafting through your sealed windows. The tea service itself is a work of art, bone china so delicate it seems to tremble with its own beauty, silver spoons that reflect your face with disturbing clarity, and sugar cubes cut with such precision they could be exhibited in a mathematics museum. You take enough sugar to ensure your dentist's children will someday attend Oxford. Because what's the point of being wealthy if you can't slowly destroy your teeth in the most expensive way possible? While you sip your liquid fortune, the housekeeper arrives for the morning briefing, a daily ritual that has more pomp than most royal ceremonies. Her hair is wound tighter than your nerves before a dinner party, and she carries a notebook the size of a small boulder, filled with information crucial to the smooth operation of your domestic empire. "Good morning, sir," she announces with the gravity of someone delivering news from the front lines of a war. The outside temperature is described as unforgiving. The street is currently clear of peddlers and other undesirable elements. and the stables have suffered only to minor, horse-related incidents since dawn. I have scheduled breakfast for a time that is both fashionable and maximally inconvenient for everyone else in the house, as per tradition. You nod solemnly, relieved to have successfully dodged another burden of meaningful choice. Decision-making, you've learned, is for people who can't afford to pay others to make decisions for them. The morning paper, already ironed completely flat by a dedicated under-butler whose sole job involves ensuring your news arrives without a single wrinkle, is presented to you with ceremonial dignity. The headlines are wonderfully predictable. Scandal involving someone you've never heard of, complaints about the fog, and another mysterious disappearance involving what appears to be a fishmonger and the Earl of Sandwich. You skim the stories carefully, taking care not to crumple any pages, because bad luck supposedly follows anyone who ruffles the news before noon. This is probably superstition, but you didn't get this rich by ignoring the wisdom of generations. All around you, your house awakens like a well-oiled machine designed for maximum comfort and minimum effort on your part. There's a faint clatter from the kitchen where an army of staff prepares meals you haven't even thought of wanting yet. The distant shriek of a parlor maid discovering that the canary has escaped again, and the heavy, measured tread of your butler as he conducts his morning inspection of the silverware for signs of existential despair. Every sound serves as a reassuring reminder that you are surrounded, coddled, and completely insulated from the outside world by multiple layers of servants, draperies, and upper-class denial. This isolation isn't loneliness, you tell yourself, it's luxury in its purest form. Oh, create what fashion magazines call an hourglass silhouette. Though the side effects include approximately an hour's worth of shallow breathing and the occasional spontaneous existential crisis brought on by oxygen deprivation, on especially ambitious mornings, your corset is tightened to a degree that allows you to hear your ancestors weeping in solidarity from beyond the grave. This is not cruelty, your maid assures you. This is fashion, and fashion, apparently, requires sacrifices that would make ancient civilizations uncomfortable. Next come layer upon layer of petticoats and underskirts, each one designed to add volume, modesty, and approximately 30 degrees of additional warmth to your morning ensemble. If you're particularly fortunate, today's dress will only require minor negotiations with the fundamental laws of physics to fasten the seemingly infinite number of buttons, hooks, and ties that hold the entire construction together. Ribbons, laces, and tiny hooks seem to multiply like particularly well-dressed rabbits, and your maid's hands become a blur of competence mixed with what you suspect is barely suppressed judgment about the impracticality of your outfit choices. She never says anything, of course, because good staff never question the wisdom of their employers, even when that wisdom involves wearing clothing that requires engineering degrees to operate properly. There's always one accessory that resists domestication, a shoe that refuses to acknowledge the existence of your foot, a glove that seems to have been designed for someone with entirely different hand architecture, or a decorative brooch that appears to have developed its own opinions about where it should be positioned. This is when the shoehorn emerges, sometimes accompanied by the aforementioned smelling salts, just in case you lose consciousness during the more strenuous phases of getting dressed. Gloves are wrestled onto your hands with a combination of prayer, perspiration, and techniques that probably violate several laws of physics. The goal is to make your hands look elegant and refined, though the process more closely resembles a wrestling match between you and some very expensive leather that has decided to be uncooperative. Hats are pinned at angles, carefully calculated to suggest effortless grace rather than the reality, which involves four people frantically negotiating with gravity, physics, and what appears to be a small bird that has taken up residence in your hair accessories. The hat must look like it simply appeared on your head through natural processes, rather than the elaborate engineering project it actually required. Throughout this entire process, the room gradually fills with a light misting of perfume or cologne, carefully applied to mask both natural body odors and the underlying scent of panic that you might actually be late for breakfast, which would be a social catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. Hair receives its own dedicated attention, brushed and curled and sculpted according to the latest Parisian fashion trends, which are always exactly one season ahead of what anyone actually wants and approximately 3 headaches behind what your scalp can reasonably tolerate. If you're male, this involves a carefully measured dab of pomade and a mustache combing session that is absolutely non-negotiable, regardless of whether you actually have a mustache worth combing. If you're female, you spend these precious minutes hoping desperately that your elaborate hairstyle doesn't collapse like a poorly constructed soufflé before you make it to luncheon, because rebuilding Victorian hair architecture midday is neither practical nor socially acceptable. Finally, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the gilded mirror that dominates one wall of your dressing room. You look simultaneously regal and slightly overwhelmed, which is probably the exact aesthetic Victorian society was aiming for. Your outfit represents an architectural achievement constructed from approximately 20 separate pieces and held together by shared hope that you won't need to visit the bathroom any time in the next 6 hours. Your dressing team steps back to admire their handiwork as if they've just unveiled a new public monument, which in many ways they have. You thank them with the appropriate level of graciousness, or at least make what you hope is a suitably appreciative sound, and allow yourself to be gently guided out of the dressing room like a precious artifact being moved between museum displays. As you totter away on shoes that were engineered exclusively for style rather than any practical considerations like walking or comfort, you realize with some amazement that it's still only 9 o'clock in the morning. The day is young, your outfit is pristine, and your personal dignity remains temporarily intact, though you're not making any long-term guarantees about that last part. You are now ready for breakfast, or at least as ready as anyone wearing a personal scaffolding system constructed from whalebone, linen, and barely controlled social anxiety can reasonably expect to be. Surviving Victorian fashion is like surviving Victorian life itself. It's a group project you never signed up for, with rules that no one actually understands, but everyone pretends to follow religiously. Breakfast in a proper Victorian household isn't simply a meal. It's an architectural marvel balanced precariously on silver platters that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. You're about to encounter eggs that have traveled from France specifically for your dining pleasure, ham from Yorkshire that has been cured with the dedication typically reserved for important religious ceremonies, and a bewildering assortment of jellies, jams, and mysterious things suspended in aspic that nobody really wants to eat, but everyone agrees are absolutely essential for maintaining proper social standards. This is definitely not your modern grab a coffee and run scenario. Nobody here is running late to anything except possibly the grave, and even that's mostly due to the bacon consumption rather than any actual scheduling conflicts. In a household of your standing, breakfast begins with what can only be described as a parade of competence and barely controlled chaos. The footman approaches the breakfast table as if he's preparing to launch a naval fleet into hostile waters. Every piece of silverware is positioned with military precision. Every plate aligned according to geometric principles that probably have names in Latin. The butler stands at attention like he's awaiting royal inspection, which, in the context of your household, he essentially is. Meanwhile, somewhere in the mysterious depths of your kitchen, the cooking staff are locked in what sounds like mortal combat with what you desperately hope is just a particularly difficult soufflé. The dining table resembles a battlefield of cutlery that would intimidate seasoned warriors. There are forks specifically designated for fish, entirely different forks for meat, specialized spoons for porridge, other spoons exclusively for jam, elaborate tongs designed solely for handling sugar cubes, and at least 3 mysterious implements, whose actual purpose has been lost to the mists of time and social complexity. Each place setting confronts you with more silverware than you have actual problems, which in Victorian society is really saying something, considering the number of problems wealthy Victorians managed to create for themselves on a daily basis. You select what you hope is an appropriate utensil and pray silently that you've guessed correctly, because using the wrong fork isn't technically a crime. But you might as well have started the French Revolution right there in your dining room. You begin with fruit, naturally, because nothing announces your wealth and supposed health consciousness quite like nibbling delicately on an orange that was imported at a cost roughly equivalent to a working class family's rent for an entire year. The fruit arrives, sliced into geometric patterns that seem to defy both physics and common sense, served in bowls so delicate you're convinced they might actually faint if you look at them too enthusiastically. Next arrives the porridge course, presented in a bowl that's technically meant for sustenance, but serves primarily as an opportunity to demonstrate exactly how much cream and sugar one person can reasonably fit into a single dish before it becomes a health hazard. Your fellow diners, assuming you have any brave enough to join you for this morning ritual, engage in spirited debates about the finer points of oat sourcing that would make agricultural scientists weep with either joy or despair. One relative swears with religious fervor by Scottish oats, while another sits in dignified silence, clearly convinced that Irish oats represent the pinnacle of breakfast grain evolution. The conversation remains scrupulously polite on the surface, but beneath these civilized exchanges, you can sense the quiet tension that only comes from generational feuds over grain preferences that have probably influenced family politics for decades. After the crucial oat negotiations conclude, it's time for what your staff refers to as the parade of hot dishes, though it more closely resembles a small army of food items arranged for your inspection and approval. There's ham, thick cut and gleaming with a glaze that reflects the morning light like stained glass, sausages arranged in precise rows that would make military drill sergeants proud, and eggs poached to a level of perfection that suggests your kitchen staff may have sold their souls to achieve this level of culinary excellence. The kippers make their grand entrance, smoked to a degree that would cause modern smoke detectors to give up entirely out of professional respect. These fish have been preserved with techniques that border on the mystical, and they arrive at your table trailing aromatic clouds that announce their presence long before they become visible. Your butler carves everything with surgical precision, while maintaining the sort of concentrated focus typically associated with brain surgery or diffusing explosive devices. Meanwhile, your household dog, bred exclusively for the purpose of looking wistful in the vicinity of food, makes his carefully choreographed daily rounds beneath the table, hoping against hope that someone might accidentally drop something edible within reach of his pampered jaws. If you're harboring any thoughts that vegetables might make a surprise appearance at this morning feast, you should probably abandon that hope immediately. The closest you'll encounter to plant matter is a tomato sliced so thin it's more of a rumor than an actual food item. And even that's considered dangerously radical by some members of your social circle. Your personal physician, strategically stationed nearby in a chair that might as well be a throne of medical judgment, arches a disapproving eyebrow whenever you even glance toward anything that might conceivably be considered healthy. He's witnessed firsthand what happened to the last person who attempted to eat spinach at breakfast, and the trauma of that incident still haunts his professional nightmares. Rather than risk medical disapproval, you wisely focus your attention on the next course, a towering architectural achievement of pastries that seems to defy several fundamental laws of physics. There are croissants so flaky they begin disintegrating at the mere mention of humidity, tarts with crusts that could probably be repurposed as building materials for small structures, and something mysteriously labeled as tipsy cake, which appears to be nothing more than a socially acceptable excuse for consuming brandy. Before 10 o'clock in the morning, the jams and jellies represent their own category of extravagance entirely. There's black rant preserves imported from Devon, damson jam from Kent, and a marmalade so bitter it allegedly started a family feud that lasted 3 generations and influenced to parliamentary elections. Everything arrives presented in ornate crystal containers that catch and reflect the morning sunlight with all the subtlety of a lighthouse beacon, creating rainbow patterns across your dining room walls. Throughout this elaborate meal, conversation floats as lightly as the steam rising from your coffee, carefully avoiding anything as potentially distressing as politics, business, or current events before the socially acceptable hour of noon. Instead, you and your breakfast companions engage in detailed discussions about weather patterns, speculation regarding the health of the Queen's favorite corgi, and lengthy debates about whether Lord Windermere's new mustache wax represents a revolutionary breakthrough in facial hair management, or a complete disaster that will influence men's grooming for generations to come. The dining room air becomes thick with the mingled aromas of toast, coffee, barely concealed gossip, and the looming specter of impending gout that threatens anyone who consumes this much rich food on a regular basis. As the meal gradually winds toward its inevitable conclusion, you find yourself strangely exhausted by the sheer effort of eating. Even though you've personally exerted less physical energy than it would take to sneeze vigorously. It's not even 10 o'clock in the morning, and you've already survived more courses than most people encounter in their entire day. You dab your lips with a napkin that probably cost more than most people's shoes. Express appropriate gratitude to your long-suffering staff, and make a quiet, private vow to yourself that you will never eat again, at least not until luncheon arrives in a few hours, and you're forced to repeat this entire elaborate process with different food and hopefully fewer medical concerns. Now that you've survived the morning's first major challenge, it's time to confront the reality that every single movement you make is being observed, analyzed, and quietly judged by an entire staff whose primary occupation involves anticipating your every need while simultaneously evaluating your choice of hat. Welcome to the complex world of managing what amounts to a small village of people whose livelihoods depend entirely on your continued satisfaction with their ability to stand perfectly still for hours at a time. The butler glides through your halls polishing silver with cloths finer than most people's hair. The housekeeper rules her domain with an iron fist concealed within a velvet glove. And somewhere in the depths of your mansion, a footman is practicing the advanced art of remaining absolutely motionless for 6 consecutive hours without blinking, because apparently this is a skill that requires regular maintenance. Owning a Victorian mansion of proper size and grandeur isn't simply about marble staircases, imported wallpaper, or having enough rooms that you occasionally discover new ones by accident. It's about mastering logistics that would challenge modern corporate executives, managing personalities that range from quietly efficient to dramatically temperamental, and somehow maintaining the illusion that all of this complexity operates itself without any effort on your part whatsoever. You are not so much a homeowner as you are the chief executive of a living, breathing, occasionally mutinous human ecosystem that requires constant feeding, careful management, and diplomatic skills that would impress seasoned ambassadors. Your life has been so carefully orchestrated and managed by others that if you ever attempted something as radical as making your own toast, 3 generations of footmen would collapse in synchronized fainting spells, and your butler would submit his resignation purely on principle. Let's examine this hierarchy, starting from the top of what sociologists might call the domestic pecking order. Your butler exists as less of an actual man and more of a walking, talking, extremely polite shadow. Government that somehow manages to be omnipresent and invisible simultaneously. He possesses knowledge that spans decades, the precise location of the good china that only appears during visits from royalty, the exact optimal temperature for serving sherry that will neither offend nor underwhelm, and detailed records of how many times your cousin Wilfred visited last year specifically for tea rather than any legitimate social purpose. The butler's eyebrows alone have developed their own communication system capable of expressing disappointment, approval, concern, and barely concealed horror with more efficiency than the telegraph system. These eyebrows have witnessed scandals, celebrations, and at least 3 incidents involving house guests and inappropriate behavior with the decorative peacocks that roam your gardens for purely aesthetic purposes. Your butler manages to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. His specially designed shoes somehow never producing audible footsteps. his presence both reassuring and slightly intimidating in the way that suggests he knows exactly where all the metaphorical bodies are buried, and possibly some literal ones as well. If you ever find yourself tempted to pour your own wine, just remember that somewhere in the house your butler is watching, probably taking detailed notes for the memoirs he'll never write but definitely thinks about during quiet moments. Next, in this carefully structured hierarchy stands your housekeeper, the undisputed monarch of everything that happens below stairs, and several things that technically happen above them as well. She commands a battalion of maids with organizational precision that would impress military generals, and her ring of keys jingles with the ominous authority of someone who holds access to every locked door, cabinet, and secret in your entire household. Your housekeeper possesses the supernatural ability to materialize in any room, precisely at the moment when you're about to do something embarrassing, questionable, or socially inappropriate. This timing is so consistently perfect that you've begun to suspect she might have developed some form of psychic powers, or at least an extensive network of informants positioned throughout your house like a domestic intelligence service. Nothing escapes her notice. Wrinkled linens that have dared to develop unauthorized creases, picture frames that have accumulated dust in patterns that don't meet her exacting standards, or that infamous incident when the scullery maid attempted to hide a broken teacup behind the asparagus boiler, apparently believing that location would provide adequate concealment from someone who knows every inch of the house better than the architect who designed it. If your butler manages your public reputation and social standing, your housekeeper serves as the guardian of your domestic dignity and private comfort. She carries a notebook written in a code that only she understands, filled with schedules, observations, and what you suspect might be detailed personality assessments of every person who works in your household, visits your home, or has ever delivered mail to your address. Then we encounter the footman, each one carefully selected for his impressive height, symmetrical facial features, and most importantly, his ability to remain standing in decorative positions for extended periods, without developing muscle cramps, existential crises, or the urge to comment on the conversations he's required to pretend not to hear. These young men serve multiple functions. They're living decorative elements that make your hallways appear longer and more impressive, mobile furniture that can be repositioned as needed for optimal aesthetic effect, and human bookends who frame your social gatherings with their silent, attractive presence. They're trained to blend into the background so effectively that guests sometimes forget they're actual people rather than particularly well-dressed statues that happen to breathe and occasionally blink. Your footmen have mastered the complex art of selective deafness, which allows them to remain completely unaware of private conversations, family scandals, and business discussions that happen directly in front of them, while simultaneously maintaining perfect awareness of when they're needed to open doors, serve refreshments, or rearrange furniture according to your suddenly changing preferences in your kitchen. A completely separate drama unfolds daily under the iron-fisted rule of your cook, a formidable individual who views meal preparation as a combination of high art, military campaign, and personal vendetta against anyone who dares to question her methods, timing, or ingredient choices. She commands a small army of kitchen maids, scullery workers, and specialized assistants whose roles are so specific that one person exists solely to ensure your eggs are boiled to exactly the right consistency. Your cook maintains detailed feuds with local suppliers who have failed to meet her standards, elaborate relationships with merchants who can provide ingredients that meet her approval, and what appears to be a supernatural ability to produce elaborate meals, while simultaneously engaging in dramatic arguments with kitchen equipment that refuses to cooperate with her vision. The kitchen operates according to schedules and hierarchies, so complex they would challenge modern business schools, with preparation for different meals happening simultaneously, specialized tools that serve single purposes, and timing so precise that everything arrives at your table at the optimal temperature, despite having been prepared in different locations by different people using different cooking methods. Throughout your house, additional staff members fulfill roles so specialized you're not entirely certain what some of them actually do on a daily basis. There's someone whose job involves maintaining your library books in alphabetical order. Another person who exists solely to ensure your flowers are arranged according to seasonal appropriateness and color theory. And at least one individual whose primary responsibility appears to be polishing doorknobs to a shine so perfect they can be used as emergency mirrors. Managing this elaborate human ecosystem requires diplomatic skills that would challenge seasoned politicians and organizational abilities that modern corporations would study with fascination and envy. You must navigate personality conflicts between staff members who have been nursing grudges since the previous decade, mediate disputes over proper procedures for tasks you didn't know existed, and somehow maintain the appearance that none of this management is actually happening because wealthy people are supposed to live effortlessly. Your daily schedule isn't created by you, but rather emerges from complex negotiations between various department heads who must coordinate their activities while maintaining the illusion that everything happens naturally and spontaneously. When you decide you'd like tea, this simple request triggers a cascade of activities involving multiple people, specialized equipment, and timing so precise it resembles a military operation designed to deliver hot beverages rather than defeat enemy forces. The laundry alone represents its own separate kingdom within your household, ruled by individuals who have developed mystical knowledge about removing stains from fabrics you can't pronounce, maintaining the structural integrity of garments that seem to be held together more by hope than actual stitching, and preserving clothing so delicate it requires its own climate-controlled environment to prevent spontaneous disintegration. Your personal belongings are maintained by people who know more about your possessions than you do. They remember which cufflinks you wore to specific events, can locate items you forgot you owned, and maintain detailed inventories of everything from your sock drawer to your collection of decorative snuff boxes that serve no practical purpose, but apparently represent important social statements about your refined tastes and cultural sophistication. The grounds surrounding your mansion require their own separate workforce of gardeners, groundskeepers, and individuals whose sole responsibility involves ensuring that your ornamental peacocks remain appropriately ornamental rather than wandering off to start new lives as wild birds. These outdoor staff members engage in constant warfare against weeds, weather, and the natural tendency of all living things to grow in directions that don't conform to geometric perfection. Your stable's house horses that live better than most. Human beings, attended by staff members who know more about equine psychology than most people understand about human behavior. These horses are groomed daily, fed according to nutritional plans that would impress modern dietitians, and maintained in a state of constant readiness for carriage rides that may or may not actually happen depending on weather conditions, your social obligations, and the current political situation regarding which streets are safe for people of your obvious wealth to travel. Communication throughout this domestic empire happens through systems so complex they make modern telecommunications look simple by comparison. Messages travel through hierarchical chains that ensure proper protocol is maintained. Information is filtered appropriately, and nothing reaches your attention unless it has been deemed worthy of your valuable time and consideration by multiple levels of staff review and approval. Your butler serves as the primary interface between your personal desires and the machinery required to fulfill them, translating your casual comments into detailed instructions that filter down through appropriate channels to reach the people actually capable of making things happen. When you mention that the drawing room feels slightly cold, this observation becomes a coordinated response involving firewood delivery, fireplace maintenance, strategic furniture repositioning, and possibly architectural consultations about heat circulation patterns. The financial aspects of maintaining this lifestyle require accounting skills that would challenge modern businesses and diplomatic negotiations with suppliers who understand that your household represents either a valuable long-term relationship or a cautionary tale about the dangers of extending credit to people who view money as an abstract concept rather than a finite resource. Your household budget encompasses everything from importing exotic foods that nobody really wants to eat to purchasing specialized equipment for maintaining clothing that exists purely for decorative purposes. Someone must negotiate with merchants who provide services you didn't know you needed. Manage relationships with craftspeople who create custom items for problems you weren't aware you had, and somehow keep track of expenses that would bankrupt small countries. Throughout all of this complexity, you must maintain the Victorian ideal of appearing completely unaware that any effort is required to sustain your lifestyle. The greatest success in managing wealth is creating the impression that luxury happens naturally, that your comfort requires no work from anyone, and that the small army of people required to maintain your daily routine are essentially invisible. Participants in a lifestyle that operates through pure aristocratic magic rather than human effort and careful planning. This illusion of effortlessness requires constant vigilance and careful performance from everyone involved. Your staff must be competent enough to anticipate your needs before you're aware of them, invisible enough to avoid disrupting your sense of privacy, and somehow present enough to provide immediate assistance when required. They walk a daily tightrope between being indispensable and unnoticed, essential and invisible, highly skilled and apparently effortless. The result is a lifestyle that appears magical to outside observers but requires the coordination of dozens of people working with precision that would impress Swiss clockmakers. Every meal happens on schedule through careful planning. Every room remains perfectly maintained through constant attention, and every aspect of your comfort is preserved through human effort that you're socially obligated to pretend doesn't exist. As you move through your day, surrounded by this elaborate support system, you begin to understand that being wealthy in Victorian London isn't simply about having money. It's about successfully managing a complex social and economic ecosystem that exists solely to maintain your comfort while preserving the illusion that such comfort requires no effort, planning, or human cost whatsoever. It's an elaborate performance in which everyone knows their role, follows their script, and maintains the shared fiction that luxury is a natural state rather than an artificial construction, requiring constant maintenance and careful coordination. Having successfully navigated the morning's challenges of awakening, dressing, breakfasting, and pretending your household manages itself, you now face the formidable task of filling the remaining hours of your day with activities sophisticated enough to justify your wealth, but not so stimulating as to cause unseemly excitement or, heaven forbid, actual perspiration. Victorian entertainment for the wealthy is an art form that balances elaborate boredom with expensive diversions, creating activities that simultaneously demonstrate your refined tastes and your complete disconnection from anything resembling practical reality. Your drawing room awaits, transformed each morning by invisible staff into a stage set designed for the performance of leisure. Every surface has been dusted to museum-quality standards. Every piece of furniture positioned according to principles of aesthetic harmony and optimal conversation flow, and every decorative object arranged to suggest casual elegance rather than the careful choreography it actually required. The piano, a magnificent instrument that costs more than most people's homes, sits ready for musical performances that will demonstrate your cultural refinement to anyone privileged enough to witness them. Of course, actually playing the piano yourself would be somewhat inappropriate unless you possess genuine talent. So you maintain a household musician whose sole responsibility involves being available for spontaneous musical moments that are carefully planned days in advance. Your library represents another theater for intellectual performance, filled with leather-bound volumes that smell of wisdom and expensive binding materials. Many of these books exist primarily for their aesthetic contribution to the room's scholarly atmosphere, though you do occasionally read them during moments when you want to feel particularly accomplished or when you need to appear thoughtfully occupied while avoiding conversations with visiting relatives who've come to discuss your family's financial obligations to their various charitable causes and social disasters. Reading, however, must be approached carefully in Victorian society. Too much intellectual engagement might lead to unseemly opinions about politics, social reform, or other topics that could disrupt the careful balance of polite society. Women especially must be cautious about appearing to learned as excessive. Education in females is considered potentially dangerous to their delicate constitutions and their prospects for appropriate marriages to men who prefer wives with decorative rather than intellectual qualities. Letter writing occupies a significant portion of your afternoon, not because you have particularly urgent communications, but because maintaining social relationships requires constant correspondence that follows rules so complex they could challenge diplomatic protocols. Every letter must strike the perfect balance between warmth and formality, Express appropriate interest in the recipient's circumstances without appearing nosy, and convey information about your own activities without seeming boastful or, conversely, appearing to suffer from any social or financial difficulties. Your writing desk, a masterpiece of craftsmanship equipped with more compartments and secret drawers than seems practically necessary, contains an arsenal of stationery that costs more per sheet than most people spend on clothing. The paper bears your family crest. The ink is imported from locations that sound romantic but probably involve considerable human suffering to produce such luxurious writing materials. And your pen collection includes instruments so delicate they require their own maintenance staff. Correspondence topics must be carefully selected to avoid anything controversial, practical, or genuinely interesting. Instead, you focus on weather observations that demonstrate your sensitivity to natural phenomena, health inquiries that show appropriate concern without suggesting anyone might actually be seriously ill, and social commentary that reveals your awareness of current events without taking positions that might offend anyone important enough to influence your social standing. Afternoon callers represent both entertainment and social obligation, arriving according to schedules negotiated through complex chains of servants who coordinate visiting times to avoid awkward overlaps between people who are currently feuding, recently reconciled, or engaged in complicated romantic situations that require careful navigation to prevent social disasters that could affect everyone's reputations for decades. Receiving visitors requires preparation that resembles staging a theatrical production. Your staff ensures that refreshments are perfectly prepared and elegantly presented, that conversation areas are arranged to facilitate appropriate social interactions, and that you yourself are positioned and dressed to maximum advantage when guests arrive. The goal is to appear completely surprised by visits that were planned with military precision and to seem delighted by company. You may or may not actually want to see tea service becomes a performance art requiring skills that combine chemistry, psychology, and diplomatic protocol. The temperature of the water, the steeping time for different varieties of tea, the selection of appropriate accompaniments, and the timing of service must all coordinate perfectly to create an atmosphere of casual elegance that conceals the elaborate preparation actually required to achieve such seemingly effortless hospitality. Conversation during these social visits follows patterns so established they resemble verbal choreography. Guests and hosts exchange carefully constructed pleasantries that convey information about social standings, recent activities, and family circumstances, while avoiding topics that might lead to genuine controversy or authentic emotional expression. The art lies in saying nothing meaningful while appearing to engage in deep, satisfying conversation that strengthens social bonds and reinforces shared values about the proper conduct of civilized society. For those moments when you crave more stimulating entertainment, your household can arrange for private performances by musicians, poets, or other artists whose talents provide cultural enrichment without requiring you to venture into public spaces where you might encounter people of inappropriate social standing, or witness scenes of urban reality that could disturb your carefully maintained sense of how the world operates. These private entertainments allow you to demonstrate your patronage of the arts while controlling the social environment to ensure that cultural exposure doesn't lead to uncomfortable questions about social conditions, political situations, or economic realities that exist beyond the boundaries of your insulated lifestyle. Artists are carefully selected for their ability to provide sophisticated entertainment without challenging perspectives or introducing ideas that might disrupt the comfortable assumptions that sustain your worldview. Games and puzzles offer another category of refined amusement, though they must be selected carefully to provide intellectual stimulation without becoming so engaging as to cause unseemly competitiveness or emotional investment in outcomes that don't actually matter. Card games are popular, but gambling must be kept at levels that demonstrate sophistication rather than desperation, and winning or losing must be handled with grace that shows proper breeding and appropriate detachment from material concerns. Needlework and other handicrafts provide acceptable activities for ladies who need to occupy their hands while engaging in conversation, though the projects undertaken must strike a balance between demonstrating skill and avoiding the appearance of actual productivity that might suggest economic necessity rather than leisure pursuit. The goal is to create beautiful objects that serve no practical purpose except to demonstrate that you have sufficient time and resources to devote hours to purely decorative activities. Throughout all these entertainments, servants hover at the edges of your awareness, ensuring that comfort is maintained, refreshments are replenished, and any practical needs are met without interrupting the flow of leisure activities. Their invisible efficiency creates the illusion that your entertainment happens naturally, rather than requiring constant support from people whose work makes your leisure possible. As afternoon progresses toward evening, you begin to understand that wealthy Victorian entertainment serves purposes beyond simple amusement. These activities demonstrate your social status, reinforce relationships with other wealthy families, display your cultural refinement, and most importantly, fill time in ways that avoid confronting the reality that having unlimited money doesn't automatically provide unlimited meaning or satisfaction. As the London sun begins its descent toward the horizon, painting the perpetual smog in shades of amber and rose, that might be beautiful if you could forget about the industrial toxins creating these lovely colors. Your household shifts into the elaborate preparations required for evening entertainment. Whether you're hosting guests or preparing to visit others, the evening hours represent the culmination of Victorian social performance, where all the morning's preparation and afternoon's positioning lead to the grand theater of dinner parties, social calls, and carefully orchestrated displays of wealth, culture, and refined breeding. Your dining room undergoes a transformation that would impress professional stage designers, evolving from its daytime configuration into an elaborate setting designed to showcase your family's prosperity, taste, and social connections. The staff works with choreographed precision to arrange table settings that require more silverware per person than most households own in total. Crystal glasses, positioned according to geometric principles that govern the proper presentation of multiple wine courses, and decorative elements that suggest casual elegance while actually representing hours of careful planning and considerable financial investment. The evening's guest list has been assembled through weeks of strategic social planning, balancing family obligations with political considerations, mixing established relationships with carefully calculated new connections, and ensuring that personality conflicts are minimized while opportunities for beneficial conversations are maximized. Your butler maintains detailed records of previous dinner combinations, tracking which guests have feuded, reconciled, formed alliances, or developed romantic interests that could either enhance or complicate future social gatherings. Preparing for dinner guests involves logistics that would challenge modern event planners and diplomatic skills that would impress professional ambassadors. Menu planning requires consideration of dietary restrictions that may not be explicitly stated, religious observations that must be respected without calling attention to differences, and personal preferences that have been carefully noted and remembered from previous encounters. Your cook approaches these challenges with the seriousness of someone planning a military campaign, because in many ways, that's exactly what a successful Victorian dinner party represents. The courses arrive in carefully orchestrated succession, each one designed to demonstrate different aspects of your household's culinary capabilities and your family's sophisticated palate. Soup arrives first, served in bowls so delicate they seem to exist purely to test guests' manual dexterity and nerve control. Fish follows, prepared according to French techniques that require specialized training and ingredients, imported at considerable expense from locations chosen more for their exotic appeal than their practical accessibility. Between courses, servants appear and disappear with synchronized precision, removing dishes and replacing them without disrupting conversation or calling attention to the elaborate choreography required to maintain seamless service. These brief interludes allow guests to rest, digest, and prepare for the next wave of culinary challenges while engaging in conversation. Topics carefully selected to avoid anything controversial enough to affect digestion or social harmony. The main course represents the evening's centerpiece, featuring meats prepared with techniques that border on architectural achievement and accompanied by vegetables that have been transformed through cooking methods so elaborate they've essentially become different substances entirely. Everything arrives at precise temperatures despite having been prepared in different locations by different people using different cooking methods. A coordination feat that seems to involve supernatural powers, or at least extremely sophisticated timing systems. Wine service throughout the meal requires knowledge that combines chemistry, geography, and social psychology, as different beverages must complement not only the food but also the conversational atmosphere and the social dynamics between guests who may have complex relationships requiring careful navigation. Your butler's wine selections reflect his understanding of your guests' preferences, his assessment of appropriate expense levels for different social situations, and his judgment about which combinations will enhance rather than complicate the evening's social objectives. Conversation during dinner follows patterns established over generations of social dining, covering topics that demonstrate cultural awareness without revealing controversial opinions, sharing information about family and social connections without appearing to gossip, and discussing current events in ways that show appropriate concern without taking positions that might offend anyone whose friendship or business relationship could be valuable to maintain. Ladies and gentlemen separate after dinner according to traditions that serve multiple social functions, allowing men to discuss business and politics in ways that might be inappropriate in mixed company, giving women opportunities to share information about family matters and social developments that require feminine perspective, and providing both groups with brief respites from the careful behavior required when both sexes are present and must maintain appropriate decorative social interactions. The gentleman's post-dinner activities center around your smoking room or library, where cigars, brandy, and conversation create an atmosphere of masculine sophistication and serious discussion about topics considered too weighty or practical for feminine consideration. These conversations may touch on business investments, political developments, or social issues that affect your class's interests, though even these more substantial topics must be approached carefully to avoid disagreements that could affect long-term relationships or business partnerships. Meanwhile, the ladies retreat to drawing rooms arranged specifically for feminine social activities, where tea, delicate refreshments, and conversation focus on topics considered appropriate for refined female discussion. Family news, social events, charitable activities, and cultural developments that demonstrate proper education and refined sensibilities, without venturing into areas considered too intellectual or controversial for delicate feminine constitutions. When the groups reunite for evening entertainment, the activities selected must appeal to mixed company while maintaining appropriate social boundaries between male and female guests. Musical performances provide popular entertainment, whether featuring professional musicians hired for the occasion or talented guests whose abilities have been carefully confirmed in advance to avoid embarrassing amateur efforts that could affect everyone's enjoyment of the evening. Dancing, when space and occasion permit, offers opportunities for appropriate social interaction between unmarried guests, while maintaining proper supervision and acceptable physical contact within carefully defined boundaries. The dance selections, music quality, and partnering arrangements all require advanced planning to ensure that social hierarchies are respected, romantic possibilities are appropriately managed, and no one feels excluded from activities that could affect their social standing or marriage prospects. Games and other group activities provide alternative entertainment options for guests who prefer less physical participation but still want to engage in social interaction that demonstrates wit, education, and appropriate competitive spirit without becoming so intense as to cause unseemly emotional displays or conflicts that could affect relationships beyond the evening's entertainment. Throughout all evening activities, servants maintain invisible presence, ensuring that comfort needs are met, refreshments are available, and practical requirements are handled without guests having to interrupt their social performance to deal with mundane necessities. This seamless service creates the illusion that sophisticated entertainment happens naturally, rather than requiring extensive human effort and careful coordination behind the scenes. As the evening progresses, guests and hosts navigate the complex social protocols surrounding departure, timing, gratitude, expression, and future social commitment, intact and relationships appropriately maintained or enhanced. The process of saying goodbye requires as much diplomatic skill as the initial welcoming, as final impressions can influence social standing and future opportunities for months or years. beyond the immediate evening than when the last guest departs and your household begins the process of cleaning, organizing, and preparing for the next day's activities. You're left with the satisfaction of having successfully orchestrated another evening of social performance that maintained your family's reputation, strengthened important relationships, demonstrated appropriate wealth and culture, and provided entertainment that met everyone's expectations without creating complications that could affect your social standing. In Victorian London's complex and unforgiving social hierarchy, as you retire from the evening's social triumph, your thoughts turn inevitably to matters of personal health and hygiene, topics that in Victorian London present challenges as complex as international diplomacy and nearly as dangerous as open warfare. The wealthy Victorian approach to bodily maintenance combines advanced medical ignorance with expensive equipment, elaborate rituals with questionable scientific foundations, and genuine concern for well-being with practices that would horrify modern healthcare professionals and probably violate several international treaties regarding human treatment. Your personal bathroom represents a monument to both luxury and medical confusion, featuring fixtures imported from exotic locations and designed according to theories about health and cleanliness that mix legitimate scientific progress with superstitions that would challenge ancient civilizations for their creative relationship with factual reality. The bathtub alone costs more than most people's annual salaries and requires a team of servants to operate safely, because apparently even bathing becomes a group activity when you're wealthy enough to afford making it unnecessarily complicated. Water heating involves logistics that would impress military engineers, freezing you or creating temperature variations that could shock your delicate system into medical crisis. The water itself has been carefully filtered through systems designed to remove impurities that might contaminate your refined constitution, though these filtering methods probably introduce different contaminants that haven't been discovered yet by scientific advancement. Bathing schedules are planned according to medical advice that changes frequently and contradicts itself regularly. As physicians debate whether daily washing promotes health through cleanliness or damages delicate skin through excessive moisture exposure, your personal doctor, a distinguished gentleman whose medical training combined provides guidance that seems authoritative, often reflects current medical fashions more than actual health benefits. The soaps and bathing products available to someone of your wealth include exotic formulations imported from locations chosen more for their romantic appeal than their practical effectiveness. French soaps promise to enhance your natural beauty through mysterious processes that probably involve more marketing creativity than actual chemistry, while English products emphasize their practical reliability and proven effectiveness in maintaining the hygiene standards that have made the British Empire a model of civilization and appropriate personal maintenance. Your medicine cabinet contains an impressive collection of remedies, tonics, and treatments that represent the cutting edge of Victorian medical science, which unfortunately means there are approximately 50% legitimate medicine and 50% creative chemistry experiments that happen to taste interesting and produce noticeable effects that may or may not be beneficial to your actual health or longevity prospects. Laudanum occupies a place of honor among your medical supplies, serving as the Victorian solution to problems ranging from genuine pain to social anxiety to the general existential discomfort that comes from having unlimited money but limited meaningful activities to occupy your time and attention. This miracle substance provides relief from various ailments while creating others that won't be fully understood until medical science advances enough to recognize addiction as a medical rather than moral issue. Patent medicines line your shelves like colorful soldiers in an army dedicated to fighting ailments, both real and imaginary. Each bottle promising miraculous cures for conditions that range from legitimate medical concerns to social problems that have been medicalized because Victorian society prefers treating symptoms with expensive remedies rather than addressing underlying causes that might require social changes or personal lifestyle modifications. Your personal physician makes regular house calls to monitor your health through methods that combine genuine medical observation with diagnostic techniques that probably have more entertainment value than scientific validity. These consultations involve extensive discussions about your constitution, your temperament, and your lifestyle habits, followed by recommendations that usually involve expensive treatments, exotic remedies, or lifestyle modifications that require purchasing specialized equipment or services from providers who coincidentally happen to be professional associates of your medical advisor. Dental care presents its own unique challenges in an era when oral hygiene combines your teeth are cleaned with powders and solutions that promise to enhance their natural whiteness while protecting them from decay. Though the active ingredients in these products include substances that modern dentistry would classify as controlled, hazardous materials requiring special disposal procedures. If you're fortunate enough to retain most of your original teeth, technical skill with creative approaches to pain management that rely heavily on alcohol, opium derivatives, anesthesia methods that won't be developed for several more decades of scientific advancement. Exercise presents another area where Victorian medical wisdom creates elaborate solutions to simple problems, developing exercise regimens that promise to strengthen your constitution without causing unseemly perspiration, muscle development that might affect your clothing fit, or physical exertion that could damage delicate internal organs that Victorian medicine believes are more fragile than they actually prove to be under normal circumstances. Your personal gymnasium, if you possess one, contains equipment designed according to theories about physical development that emphasize gentle, controlled movement rather than vigorous activity that might overstimulate your nervous system or cause perspiration that could indicate. Walking represents the most socially acceptable form of exercise, though it must be approached carefully to ensure appropriate pace, suitable locations, and proper companionship that maintains social propriety while providing sufficient physical activity to promote health without suggesting that you actually need exercise for practical reasons rather than refined health maintenance. Dietary considerations require constant attention to medical advice that changes regularly as new theories about nutrition compete with established beliefs about appropriate food consumption for people of different social classes, constitutional types, and moral characters. People should eat to maintain their status while promoting their health. Sleep habits receive medical attention that treats rest as both natural requirement and potential health hazard. depending on timing, duration, position, and environmental factors that must be carefully controlled to ensure restorative sleep without promoting laziness, encouraging inappropriate dreams, or disrupting the delicate balance of physical and mental health that Victorian medicine believes requires constant monitoring and frequent adjustment through medical intervention. Your bedroom environment is carefully maintained according to theories about air circulation, temperature control, and atmospheric purity that combine legitimate concerns about indoor air quality with beliefs about nighttime health hazards that probably cause more anxiety than actual medical benefit. Windows must be positioned to provide fresh air without creating drafts that could cause respiratory problems, while bedding must be selected and maintained to promote comfortable rest without encouraging excessive comfort that might weaken your character through self-indulgence. Mental health receives attention through approaches that recognize psychological well-being as important, while misunderstanding most of its actual causes and effective treatments, leading to recommendations that range from genuinely helpful lifestyle modifications to expensive therapies that probably provide more emotional difficulties that require professional attention and family support. Throughout all these health and hygiene considerations, the underlying challenge remains balancing legitimate medical needs with social expectations about how wealthy people should approach bodily maintenance, creating elaborate routines that demonstrate appropriate concern for health while avoiding any suggestions that you might be subject to the same physical limitations and medical vulnerabilities that affect people of lower social standing who can't afford such sophisticated approaches to personal care and medical maintenance. As your elaborate day draws to its carefully orchestrated conclusion, you find yourself in the quiet sanctuary of your private chambers, surrounded by the accumulated trappings of extreme wealth and social privilege, contemplating the strange reality of a life where every comfort has been anticipated, every need met before you could articulate it, and every moment carefully managed to shield you from the practical realities that occupy most of humanity's daily attention and concern. The process of preparing for sleep involves its own elaborate ritual. As your personal attendants help you navigate the complex reverse engineering required to remove the architectural achievements that constitute your daily wardrobe. Each layer represents not just clothing, but a barrier between you and the world. And removing them feels like dismantling a carefully constructed social identity that has shaped every interaction you've experienced. Since awakening this morning, in your palatial bed, your night clothes, naturally, cost more than most people spend on their entire wardrobes for a year. Crafted from materials so fine, they seem to exist primarily to remind you that even unconscious hours can be luxurious when you possess sufficient wealth to make comfort a constant rather than an occasional pleasure. These garments have been prepared by hands you'll never see, maintained by people whose names you might never learn, and delivered through systems so complex they rival international trade networks in their organizational sophistication as you settle into your bed. That magnificent piece of furniture that has its own weather systems and probably qualifies as a small architectural structure in its own right. You have the opportunity to reflect on a day that represents both the pinnacle of human luxury and a peculiar form of elaborate imprisonment within systems designed to provide comfort while eliminating most opportunities for genuine agency. personal growth, or meaningful connection with the broader human experience. Your wealth has purchased you a life of extraordinary comfort and unprecedented security. But it has also created a barrier between you and most of human experience that is so complete you might as well be living on a different planet from the majority of people who share your city, your country, and your historical moment. Every interaction has been filtered through layers of servants, social protocols, and economic relationships that prevent authentic connection with anyone whose life experiences might challenge your assumptions about how the world operates. The elaborate household machinery that sustains your daily existence represents a small economy in itself, providing employment for dozens of people whose livelihoods depend entirely on your continued satisfaction with their services, creating relationships that combine genuine human connection with economic dependency in ways that make authentic friendship or honest communication nearly impossible to achieve or maintain. Your social circle consists primarily of people whose lives mirror your own in their insulation from practical reality, creating a closed system where everyone shares similar assumptions, similar limitations, and similar blind spots about the broader world that exists beyond the boundaries of extreme wealth and social privilege. Conversations rarely venture beyond topics that maintain comfortable illusions about the sustainability and justice of systems that concentrate such extraordinary resources in so few hands. The entertainment, education, and cultural activities available to someone of your social standing, while elaborate and expensive, often serve more to reinforce existing worldviews than to expand understanding or challenge assumptions about society, politics, economics, or human nature. Art, literature, music, and intellectual discourse are carefully curated to provide sophistication without disruption, culture without controversy, and learning without transformation that might lead to uncomfortable questions about the systems that sustain your lifestyle. Even your health and physical well-being are managed through systems that combine genuine medical care with elaborate rituals designed more to demonstrate wealth than to promote actual wellness, creating routines that may provide comfort and social reassurance, while potentially interfering with the simple, practical approaches to nutrition, exercise, and medical care that would probably serve your actual health needs more effectively than the complex, expensive alternatives available to someone of your economic status. The food you consume, while elaborately prepared and expensively sourced, often prioritizes social signaling over nutritional value, creating dining experiences that demonstrate cultural sophistication and economic power, while potentially neglecting the simple dietary requirements that would sustain optimal health and energy. Meals become performances rather than nourishment, social rituals rather than practical necessities, elaborate displays rather than simple satisfaction of basic human needs. Your living spaces, magnificent as they are, often prioritize aesthetic impression over practical comfort, creating environments designed to impress visitors rather than serve residents, to demonstrate wealth rather than facilitate daily life, to make social statements rather than provide the simple, comfortable functionality that would actually enhance your daily experience and personal satisfaction. The clothing that adorns your body represents triumph of fashion over function, creating daily experiences of physical discomfort and practical limitation in service of social expectations that prioritize appearance over comfort, status demonstration over personal preference, and conformity to arbitrary standards over individual expression or practical consideration for the activities you might want to pursue. Yet despite these limitations and contradictions, your life also provides opportunities for experience, learning, and contribution that are unavailable to people struggling with basic survival needs, economic insecurity, or social limitations that prevent them from accessing education, culture, travel, and other enriching experiences that wealth can provide. When used thoughtfully and purposefully, your financial resources could support artistic endeavors, scientific research, educational initiatives, and charitable activities that benefit society while providing meaningful purpose and genuine satisfaction that transcends the elaborate but ultimately empty rituals of social performance and competitive luxury consumption that occupy much of wealthy Victorian social life. The challenge, as you lie in your palatial bed, contemplating another day of elaborate comfort and careful insulation from reality, is finding ways to use the opportunities that wealth provides while avoiding the traps that extreme privilege creates, maintaining connection with broader human experience while enjoying the benefits of economic security, and contributing something meaningful to the world rather than simply consuming its resources in increasingly elaborate and expensive ways. Tomorrow will bring another day of managed comfort, careful entertainment, and elaborate social performance, but it will also bring opportunities to choose how to use the extraordinary privileges that accident of birth and economic circumstance have provided. The question that accompanies you into sleep is whether you will use another day to reinforce the systems and assumptions that sustain your isolated comfort, or whether you will find ways to engage with the broader world in ways that bring meaning, purpose, and genuine connection to a life that has been designed to provide everything except authentic challenge and real significance. As the sounds of Victorian London fade into the distance beyond your sealed windows, filtered through layers of wealth and social protection that create their own form of silence, you drift toward sleep, knowing that you have successfully survived another day of being filthy rich in an era when such wealth provides both extraordinary opportunity and peculiar limitation, remarkable comfort and subtle imprisonment, unlimited resources and carefully constrained experience. The morning will bring new opportunities to navigate these contradictions, to find meaning within luxury, and to discover whether true satisfaction can be purchased with unlimited money, or whether it requires something else entirely. Something that no amount of wealth can buy, but that every human being, regardless of economic circumstance, must ultimately find within themselves and in their relationships with others who share this complex, challenging, and ultimately mysterious experience of being human in a world that distributes its resources and opportunities in ways that challenge both justice and understanding. Sweet dreams from your world of silk and silver, marble and mahogany, where every comfort has been anticipated and every need met, yet where the greatest luxury might ultimately prove to be the simple human connections and authentic experiences that no amount of money can guarantee, purchase, or replace, but which remain available to anyone willing to look beyond the elaborate barriers that extreme wealth creates between the human heart and the world it inhabits.